Welcome to Season 2 of The Automated Entrepreneur. On this week's episode, Throwing Rocks. A friend of mine called the other day and asked if I had a little time to spare. I told him I always had time for him and that the coffee was already made. He arrived 45 minutes later, dressed in a gray overcoat, dripping from the morning rain. His shoulders drooped, and they were rounded from the weight of the world. I took his coat, and we settled in the living room by a roaring fire. I left him to get comfortable, but returned with 2 mugs of Colombian coffee and a bottle of Bailey's. He grabbed his mug with 2 hands and took a deep sip before sinking deep into the couch. I waited patiently for him to gather his thoughts. He spoke with a graveled quiver, like a man beaten for the last time. A boxer lacking the strength to rise from the canvas. He spoke about how the coronavirus had taken its toll, how it had cost him his job, the one that he'd held for 11 years, and how he missed the many friends that he worked with, and how they too had lost their jobs. He felt hopeless in the knowledge that employers weren't really looking to hire someone his age. He was an old dog with old skills. He felt the strain of not knowing how he would continue to pay the mortgage and all the monthly expenses. But it was the stress in his wife's eyes and the fear on his children's faces that proved unbearable. There was no hiding from the truth. He had no answers. He had been rendered powerless. He had had a great fall, but all the king's men couldn't put him back together again. I rose and grabbed his coat from the closet. "Let's go," I commanded. Perplexed, he followed. I grabbed a little item from the desk drawer, locked the house door, and drove him to a little beach just 10 minutes away. We walked the shoreline for 20 minutes as I reminded him of all the wonderful things that he had accomplished, the wonderful husband and father he'd become, the friend that he was, the talents that he had had, and the possibilities that lay before him. We came to stop before a small pile of rocks which had been placed by the town's crew after they had groomed the beach earlier that summer. I asked my friend to pick up the largest rock he could find, and he did as I asked. Then I reached into my pocket and withdrew the black marker that I had taken from the drawer at home. "I want you to print on it," I said. "A single word representing your biggest pain point." "Money," he wrote. "Now hand it to me," I commanded, and he did. "Now, find the next largest rock and write on it your next biggest concern." After scanning the pile, he plucked a fair-sized specimen and wrote a single word on it. "Time." I held out my hand, and he placed it in my palm. He said not a word. I instructed him to select another rock. "What is it you feel responsible to solve? Write it down." He grabbed the next rock and wrote, "Problems." I nodded and took the object from him. "One last rock," I smiled. "Think about your greatest question." He paused and stared down at the pile of rocks for a very long time. And then, slowly, he reached down and picked up the final stone. He wrote slowly and placed it in my hand. "Purpose." I smiled, and cradling all 4 rocks in my arm, I walked to the water's edge and waited for him to join me. When he stood beside me, I handed him the first stone, the one which read, "Money. This represents the earth and all your worldly possessions. Cast them into the sea." He frowned, but took the rock and threw it out far into the water. Next, I gave him the one marked "Time." This represents air and your inability to create more of it. Now cast it out into the sea. He did as I instructed and threw it further than the first. I handed him the third rock, "Problems." This represents fire and the trials that you are challenged by. Cast them upon the water. He threw the rock even further. This is the final stone, "Purpose." It represents water and all your limiting beliefs. He nodded and threw it farther than all the rest. I placed my hands on both his shoulders and smiled confidently. Congratulations. You have cast away the weight of the world. You have before you a new year and a blank canvas. The chains have been broken. You are a prisoner no more. As we go forth into this new year, you will learn many secrets. Secrets which will enlighten you and transform you. Behold, your pain belongs to me. Every week we will meet right here, and I will teach you what you need to know to live a prosperous life, a lifestyle by design. You need only to keep our appointments every Monday. I will help you. And that is this week's episode of The Automated Entrepreneur.